At 31, I thought I had a decent life, not flashy or perfect, just decent. An apartment that didn't leak, a job that paid on time, groceries with labels I could actually read. But in my family, decent never counted for much. I was the one who remembered birthdays, paid the co-pays when mom's insurance lapsed, sent money to dad when the heat was cut off in January. No one ever said thank you, because I wasn't the favorite. That was Zeke. Zeke, who always meant well. Zeke, who dropped out of college twice. Zeke, who called himself a creator while living in the basement making art on borrowed equipment. I was the practical one, the spreadsheet. He was the story. My name is Martha Wells, and I was raised to carry what everyone else dropped. I started working at 15, cashiering at the dollar store down the road. One day, the manager asked if I was saving up for a car. I told him I was saving up for groceries. At that time, Dad lost his job and insisted it wasn't my problem. But the next morning, I found Mom in the kitchen, tears in her eyes, holding an overdue electric bill. So, I used my paycheck. And so began the rhythm. Crisis. Martha. Silence. Repeat. Even as an adult, I convinced myself it was just what families did. Then last week, I got a letter from the bank, addressed to Martha Wells, primary borrower. I hadn't signed any mortgage papers, I hadn't bought a house. But here I was, being told I owed for one. At first, I thought it was a scam, but then I saw the fine print. The loan was real. The address was my parents'. And the primary borrower was me. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the letter as if it might explode in my hands. My fingers shook, not from fear of the debt, but from the betrayal. I didn't remember signing anything. But the worst part wasn't the debt. It was realizing that I could believe they'd do this to me. An hour later, a voicemail from Mom. No apology, no panic, just matter of fact. We were going to tell you, it's only in your name on paper, you know we'd never let it affect you. That line hit me like a punch. Only in your name on paper. Like I was a tool, not a daughter, not a person, just a line on a balance sheet. Then came Zeke. He messaged me a link to support our home fundraiser. Hey, if you could just repost this, Mom said it'll really help visibility. No apology, no explanation, just a request to play my part. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and kept thinking the same thought. If they used my name without asking, how much else have I given without realizing it? The next day, I did what I always did, rationalized. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they needed a cosigner and forgot to ask. Maybe Mom didn't know Dad used my name. Maybe the word maybe had carried more weight in my life than love ever had. I logged into the loan portal. The security questions, birthday, first pet, were all mine. This wasn't an accident. I called the loan office, asking for clarification. The woman on the line said, "You're listed as the primary borrower, the others are secondary and deferred. That means the credit responsibility starts with you." Deferred. Like my hopes, like my life. She paused. "Are you not living at that property?" I laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't feel like mine. "No," I said. "I'm the one who left so they could keep the couch." I hung up. That night, Mom called again. Her tone was soft now, not sharp, sweet, even, practiced. "Honey, you know we'd never hurt you. It's just, you always know how to handle these things. You're the responsible one." As if responsibility was love. As if being useful was the only way I could belong. I didn't argue. I just listened to the soft guilt, the gentle manipulation, the reminder that I was only ever valued when I was giving something. When the call ended, I sat there staring at the black screen of my phone, and whispered to no one. Maybe it's not a misunderstanding, maybe this is who they've always been. I hadn't touched the quilt in years. It sat folded in the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. The one thing I kept after Grandma passed. Hand-stitched squares in faded reds and pale blues, sewn by someone who'd held every memory tighter than most people ever held me. That night, after the third call from Mom, I couldn't sleep. So I opened the chest. The scent of old cotton and lavender hit me like a wave of nostalgia. I lifted the quilt, and something fluttered loose beneath it. A letter, yellowed at the corners, in Grandma's familiar cursive. "Dear Martha. If you're reading this, you've probably given more than you should. It's how they raised you, not to be seen, but to fix things quietly. But sweet girl, the world doesn't change just because you carry it better. Sometimes you have to put it down. let it fall. Let them see what it's like without you holding it up. I read it twice. Then again. Her words weren't bitter, just tired. Like she'd been through this same cycle herself. Maybe she had. Maybe that's why she never asked for much. She left a note, folded beneath the fabric that was meant to keep me warm when the house grew cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, the quilt across my lap, the letter in my hand. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as a resource, not as someone to lean on, but just as me. Maybe love isn't always loud. Maybe it's the quiet whisper that tells you to walk, not stay. I didn't call before coming, no dramatic announcement, no warnings. Just a quiet drive back to the house I once called home, where my presence was felt more in unpaid bills than in the warmth of a hug. The front yard hadn't changed. The plastic flamingo still leaned sideways, the porch light flickering like it always did, tired but refusing to burn out. I carried a folder in my bag, color-coded and labeled, printouts of every transfer I'd ever made, dates, amounts, confirmations. No one greeted me at the door. Inside, Mom was at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She looked up, startled but not surprised. "Martha, you should have called." I didn't answer. I just sat down at the dining table, took out the folder, and laid the papers flat, like a final hand in a losing game. "These are the payments, the money you said was going to the mortgage. The bank says it hasn't been paid in months." Dad appeared in the hallway, clutching his lower back like he always did, like his anger had pulled muscles once again. "Why are you digging like this?" he asked. "You know we're not trying to hurt you." I looked at them both, and for once, I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch, didn't beg to be heard. This isn't about hurt, this is about honesty, and what happens when it runs out. Maybe silence was the only thing keeping the illusion intact. They didn't say much after that. No shouting, no tears. Just the sound of a wooden spoon clattering into the sink, the hum of something boiling over. Dad sat down across from me, as if he wanted to argue but didn't know how. "And Mom?" She stirred the air like she was trying to undo something that had already been done. "We didn't think it would get this far," she said finally. "We were trying to keep the family together." It took everything in me not to laugh. Keep the family together by lying to the one person keeping the lights on? I didn't say another word. Not because I didn't have thoughts, but because, for the first time, my silence felt louder than their excuses. I stood, packed the folder back into my bag. Their eyes followed me, not with guilt, but confusion, as if they still didn't understand why I was walking away from the arrangement they built on my back. Zeke appeared in the hallway, headphones around his neck, eyes half closed. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he muttered. "It's not like we used the money for vacations." I turned toward him, no anger, just exhaustion. "That's right, you used it for comfort. Yours," he scoffed. Mom whispered, "You're being cold, Martha." I paused at the door. Cold is what happens when the fire burns too long and no one checks if you're okay. Maybe walking away wasn't the betrayal. Maybe staying silent was. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I stayed home, wrapped in the same quilt Grandma left me, the letter still tucked beneath its edge. My hands were cold, but my mind was sharper than ever. I gathered the documents again, this time with purpose. Bank statements, pay stubs, screenshots. A printed transcript of the call with the loan officer. Every transfer I'd made, every promise they'd broken. I packed it neatly in an envelope, wrote 2 names on the front, Victor and Darla Wells. No Mom, no Dad, just the names of 2 adults who made a choice. I didn't call, I didn't warn. I sent the envelope through registered mail, signature required, because this time, they'd have to acknowledge what I gave them in writing. Then I logged into my accounts. I deleted every auto payment, unlinked every connection. For the first time since I was 16, I made my financial life mine again. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the grief had turned into clarity. Later that night, a text buzzed through from Zeke. "Thanks for the drama, now we're all sinking." I stared at the message. No apology, no ownership, just blame, wrapped in sarcasm. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it "What I Keep." And in the first row, I typed one word, peace. Maybe revenge isn't always noise. Maybe it's the silence after you've said nothing and done everything. I wasn't invited. Of course, I wasn't. It was Zeke who posted about it first, a farewell dinner before the house went into foreclosure. Mom had even ordered a cake, Thank you for the memories. The caption read like a eulogy for the house. But not a single line mentioned who kept it standing all those years. I didn't go to shame them. I went because I needed to look them in the eyes one last time. I walked in just as Dad was lighting the candles on the table. Everyone turned. Forks paused. Mom's smile faltered. Zeke blinked. Martha, Mom said slowly, this is unexpected. I held up a manila folder. Not raised, not dramatic. Just placed it on the table next to the mashed potatoes. Bank cleared the balance this morning. Loan is paid, mortgage settled, the house won't be taken, but I won't be paying for anything else. Silence. Then Dad cleared his throat. We didn't ask you to do that. You didn't have to, I said, you just expected it. Zeke scoffed under his breath. Why now, to make us feel guilty? I shook my head. No, just to make it official, that this house was never saved by love, only by someone you forgot to love back. I turned and walked out. No one followed. No one said thank you. No one stopped me. And I didn't slam the door. Maybe closure isn't a scene. Maybe it's the sound of your own footsteps walking away without regret. The next morning, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder what they were saying. I didn't rehearse comebacks or imagine closure, because closure had already happened when no one got up from that dinner table. I sat in my apartment with a cup of black tea, letting the warmth settle between my palms. The silence felt heavier than usual, but not unkind, like a room finally emptied of expectations. Later that afternoon, a text buzzed through from Zeke. So now what? You just vanish? I didn't answer. An hour later, a voicemail came in. Mom's voice strained. Not quite angry, not quite sad. Just hollow. You could have handled it better. We're family, and families don't give up on each other. I almost smiled. They hadn't noticed. They gave up on me years ago. They just called it love because I kept showing up. That night, I opened my old savings ledger, the one I used before everything blurred. The balance was low, but it was mine again. The quiet in the room wasn't loneliness. It was honesty. For once, there was no one else's debt hiding in my fridge. No one's prescription refill sitting in my inbox. Just me and stillness. Maybe the loudest thing I ever did was leave without raising my voice. I didn't buy new furniture. I didn't celebrate. I just went home. My real home. A one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor with no elevator and a door that sticks if you don't pull it just right. But it was mine. Every corner, every chipped tile, every creaky floorboard belonged to me. The fridge didn't hold someone else's supplements. The hallway didn't echo with someone else's cough. And when I lay in bed, I wasn't waiting for a late-night call asking for help. I was just resting. Not recovering, not bracing, just resting. I woke up the next morning and realized it was the first time in a decade I didn't feel behind on something. I made oatmeal, watered the 2 plants I managed to keep alive, sat by the window, and watched the light change colors on the floor. There were no crises, no lists, no guilt. And the silence? It didn't hurt anymore. It felt earned. There's an ache that comes from being needed for all the wrong reasons. But there's also a peace that comes when you finally stop volunteering to carry what no one else wants to lift. Zeke didn't message again. Mom didn't call. Dad didn't send another guilt-wrapped reminder. Maybe they were hoping I'd feel lonely. Maybe they thought I'd miss the noise, but I didn't. I missed being seen. And now I had that. Even if the only person seeing me was me. Maybe you don't need a full house to feel full. Maybe an empty room with your name on the lease is enough. The mail came on a Thursday. Nothing dramatic, just a brown envelope with my name typed neatly across the front. Inside was the final confirmation from the bank. My name had been removed from the house. No more liability. No more hidden debt. No more pretending. I stared at the letter for a long time. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it was the first official proof that I had finally unhooked myself from a history that never fully claimed me. They said I was temporary. Said I was just the in-between. The filler. The reliable one until Zeke figured things out. Until Dad got another contract. Until Mom could catch her breath. But temporary doesn't hold a house together for 8 years. Temporary doesn't skip meals to make sure the power stays on. Temporary doesn't remember birthdays, refill prescriptions, or sit in waiting rooms until everyone else goes home. They called me the strong one, but only when it suited them. When I carried, when I paid, when I stayed quiet. Now I wasn't temporary. I was permanent in my own space. In my own name. I passed by the mirror that night and saw something in my reflection I hadn't seen in years. Steadiness. Not pride, not triumph, just steadiness. The kind that comes when you finally stop negotiating your worth. I used to think strength was proving I belonged. But now I know real strength is leaving when you're no longer respected. Even if they call it betrayal. Maybe I was never the placeholder. Maybe I was the foundation, and they just never bothered to see it. 3 months later, I ran into Mrs. Heller, our old neighbor. She was walking her dog past the library when she saw me sitting on the bench. We talked for a while about the weather, about her garden, about everything except them. Then she paused and said, "Your mother told everyone you moved away out of spite, that you turned your back when they needed you most." I didn't flinch. I just nodded. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to correct the story. Let them have it. Let them keep their version. Because the truth wasn't something I needed to shout anymore. I was already living in it. I said goodbye to Mrs. Heller and walked home. Not to a mansion. Not to a grand life. Just a quiet place with my name on the lease and no one else's demands on the walls. The mailbox had no threats. The phone didn't buzz at midnight. I made dinner for one, watered my plants, read a book without checking the clock. And when I turned off the light that night, I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I just breathed. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you stop waiting for an apology. When you realize you don't need them to see you, as long as you finally see yourself. And if they ever tell the story of how I left, I hope they remember this much: I didn't leave in anger. I left in truth. Because maybe the quietest goodbye is also the most honest one.